host, Vincent, and I'm here with my co-host, Cody. Jack Iroottsp, consultant, has been an important writer of animation and comic books for over 30 years. He's done voiceovers, story editing, and art direction as well. During his career, he has worked for virtually every major animation studio in Hollywood, including Disney, Warner's, Marvel, and Hanna-Barbera. He's developed and wrote for Alvin and the Chipmunks, Scooby-Doo, DuckTales, Peter Pan, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, and many other TV series. His comic book credits are equally extensive, including adaptations of Roger Rabbit, Aladdin, Toy Story, and The Lion King for Disney. For Warner's, he's wrote more Looney Tunes stories than anyone in history. He has been a consultant for the Pink Panther, Dumb and Dumber, and Johnny Bravo animated shows, as well as many private clients. Animation Magazine has honored Jack Iroottsp by naming him one of the top animation writers. He teaches and lectures at schools, libraries, and museums, and his series of interviews with artists, Art with Iroottsp, can be seen on the internet. And let's introduce him right now. Welcome to the show, Jack. So let's give a big round of applause, guys. Yay! Yes. All right, so
especially for that mispronunciation of my last name. And don't worry about it, because my father collected mispronunciations.
So how is it pronounced? Because for the last 3 days, I've been talking to Cody going, I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
I'm pretty sure it's how it's spelled.
Yeah, it's Enyart. Yeah. And it's a contraction of a Dutch name that nobody could pronounce on the boat on the way over 100 years ago and all that stuff. Yeah. Now, what you might like to know here is when, on occasion, when I wasn't able to put my name on a project for whatever reasons, I could sneak it into the script as a character, and I'd call myself John Train, because spelled backwards, it's a much more logical name than Enyart.
It is.
Wow.
So we have Jack here, and we're very happy to have you here because we've been excited. I've been kind of hyping Cody up on this because he didn't know who you were at first.
Well,
and the biggest thing from me was that I found out about you through your teaching.
That's what I was wondering. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
You and I had talked before,
right?
And I was going to take one of your classes, and
right.
That's how I met him. That's why I was
okay.
so excited to introduce you to him, because of the fact of to find out everything in your history and like all the things you've actually done. It's very surprising to be able to talk to somebody with that much notoriety.
Yeah.
Hey, how do you think I feel when I turn around and see all this? Yeah.
So we've got a couple of questions that we kind of had lined up for you. We'll go through there. We'll do an ad read like we always do. And then we'll do a little bit of free form and kind of talk to you past that. So let's start out. Cody, you got your questions queued up?
Yep.
All right.
Questions?
Jack, who began to inspire you, and also what type of art inspired you?
Okay. Well, this is getting easier to answer. Do either of you guys see the series Mad Men?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was my father's life story. My father was like the West Coast Don Draper.
Wow.
Oh, right. So, and it made it so much simpler when Mad Men came on to tell people what my background was like. That was it. He ran an ad agency in Los Angeles in the 50s and 60s. And I got to tell you guys, that show, I mean, I was obsessed with it. And towards the end of the show, as they got into the 70s, when I started to work in my dad's ad agency, as a teenager, on the show, some of my old wardrobe was showing up, which was really freaky, like, oh, I had that shirt. But that's what it was. And my father took my brothers and me into the agency as basically cheap labor, in the art department. Yeah. And he actually had a cartoonist on staff. Nowadays most of that stuff is done freelance, but I just had access to great stuff. It was so an essential thing I think to understand about me is this has always been the family business, we always had art supplies at home, and it was always, do this, that, and everything. And also it being advertising, we tossed around ideas like crazy. Rather than, like the Kennedys played touch football and the Enyarts, would play, hey, how about this ad campaign?
That's really cool.
Yeah. Can I tell you one more cool thing, which is great?
Oh, yeah. Go right ahead.
Okay, you guys like Rocky and Bullwinkle and all that?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. You won't believe this, but about 1960, so I'm 10 years old, and my father, because of his connections in LA, gets on Jay Ward's mailing list for Jay Ward Productions. We would get the damnedest stuff in the mail, like, we're going to shave Bullwinkle in the, we're going to shave a live moose in the lobby of a hotel, blah, 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 and they ran Bullwinkle for president. They had a block party on Sunset Boulevard for the Bullwinkle for President campaign, and I went to it.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy.
Nice. If you're 10 years old, this is like, you're warped for life. So, how's that for origins?
Yeah, that is awesome, dude. I guess, the second question, you seem pretty passionate. What gets you motivated and makes your creative juices flow? I sometimes have trouble with that. Like,
you know what?
Block.
Really, let me tell you something interesting. In my consulting business, and with students and all that, I thought that would be a major problem. Most of the creative people I know, their big problem is that they have too many ideas and too many things, and they can't organize it. And what I'm speculating is that in your case, sometimes that may paralyze you. It's like, where do I start, in the morning? And on my own interview show, Art with Enyart, I did and I would ask people how they'd organize their day. And the best people would just wake up and look at me and say, well, what do you know? I don't know. I wake up and I do whatever, Some people organize instinctively and some people organize systematically. But because I grew up in the ad agency, I'm very motivated by deadlines. And I will create deadlines for myself. And my big problem is that in professional instances, I'll give myself too tight a deadline. And I hate to go back and say, please give me another day or blah, 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 and all that. Yeah. But deadlines work for me,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I see. Sometimes deadlines, they get me, not frustrated, but very, all tensed up. I get worried about that, and I worry.
You seem to have an issue with deadlines. We must explore this. And it's like, yeah. Well, look, it's true. Yeah, to say, let me tell you one of my theories here. I think that we all have a basic character and we kind of can evolve it, and I actually think that this is particularly difficult for men. I think women are more flexible than men. But, as I've gotten older, I've actually learned better how to trick myself into doing things, I don't know how, I'm still open to change and all that, but I know myself well enough that I can say, you're doing this to yourself and all that. So I think if you, if you can kind of stand aside from yourself and see what you're doing or what's bugging you or whatever, that helps, Yeah.
For sure. That's awesome.
It's a serious issue.
Yeah, it is. It really gets me down. I'll be all pumped up to draw one day, and I'll do a bunch of stuff, do a bunch of sketches, or something will, not feel right, and then I'll just shut down. I'll shut down, and I'm like, So,
no kidding, huh? Yeah. Well, I think we could do this whole program about Corey's issues.
Yeah. No, but yeah.
Because they apply to everybody,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Well, listen, can I confess something to you guys? Because your next question was, do you struggle internally with your passion?
Yeah.
I have to level with you with something. I'm in my 60s, and in this past year, I have suddenly been afflicted with a skin condition called eczema. It makes you itch. It is horrid. And I'm under treatment for it. It's a controllable kind of thing. But it has so changed my energy, my sleep patterns, my ability to do things. And I'm trying to adjust to this. So in answer to the question, do I struggle internally with your passion? I'm struggling externally with how my body can handle my responsibilities, like getting the energy up for certain things. I've had to do this podcast, right? So I took a nap, beforehand and all that. It kills me that, 2 years ago, I didn't have to do that. And my wife, I have an absolutely wonderful wife. She's in the fashion industry and she's, smart and beautiful and, all those wonderful things. And she kind of supervises me a bit and she tells me to rest. And I've always had a problem with resting. I think I've actually learned from her to nap, like a constructive nap. But, I think, what I'm saying is that I have been used to certain patterns and kind of charging through things for decades, and I'm having to make an adjustment now that's real difficult, but has to be done. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have quite a resume.
Yeah.
What was it like to work on those projects? You worked on a book pertaining to Roger Rabbit, or did you work directly with them on Roger Rabbit?
Well, actually, you know what? Let me hold that for a minute because I'm going to kind of go chronologically here, which might help, and we'll get back to Roger Rabbit because that's interesting. But what happened was, from my father's advertising agency, when I was in my early 20s. I started a little design studio and I did cartoons and things. I did panel cartoons, which are the things you see in the New Yorker still, like a drawing, a caption under. And I thought, that's what I wanted to be, one of those sophisticated New Yorker artists, You guys probably won't believe this, but in the 50s and 60s in the movies, cartoonists were playboys,
They still are. No.
Yeah. And they wore tuxedos and everything, and they had an assistant who did all the drawing for them, and they were all rich, and I thought, well, that's great, right? Then I found out that basically that doesn't exist anymore, not even in New York, But here I was in Los Angeles, and so I did what I recommend everybody. I joined an organization. It was out here. It was called the Comic Art Professional Society, and it was for people who worked in comics and cartoons. And at the first meeting, two guys met who had worked on, I think it was a Little Lulu comic book or something. Mm-hmm. They'd worked together for 30 years and they'd never met.
Oh, wow.
So this organization was a way to meet other cartoonists, in a network and all that. And through that, I met a wonderful guy, Mark Evanier, who was basically my mentor, younger than me, but still, better than me. And he got me into comic book writing. And I loved comic book writing. I still do. I think it's a great medium. And what I did was I wrote Warner Brothers and Disney cartoons. And from that, I got into Warner Brothers Animation.
Oh, wow.
About 1980. So that's the path there, So, yeah, exciting stuff. Yeah, okay. So, So we could go direct to Warner Brothers from there because you have a question further down here about, Friz Freeling and Mel Blanc and Chuck Jones and all that. Okay.
Yeah, I had that question as well.
Yeah. Everybody does. So from working with Warner Brothers Comics, one day I called up the cartoon department at the studio, and they said, come on in. And they needed a young new writer, Wow. Yeah. But the cartoon department was almost closed down then. My boss then, another great person. I had two mentors, Mark Evanier and Hal Gear. Hal Gear was this great old-fashioned, greatest generation guy. He died within the past month, and I went to his funeral. He was 100 years old.
Holy cow.
Guys, it was a military funeral. He was a hero in World War II. If you've never heard the guns go off at a military funeral, you haven't heard anything. Yeah. But he was a combat photographer, everything. But he kept the department open in the early 80s when all they were doing was rerunning things on TV. And Hal had the idea that we could do some new animated specials. And he brought in Friz Freeling and Mel Blanc, for the voices, and Chuck Jones, and me, the young writer.
Holy cow.
So what was going on here was these guys were in their 60s, so they're the age that I am now, and I got to watch them kind of jockeying around each other. They were at the point where I think they were starting to become aware that, every kid in the world loved their stuff. And so they were working on their reputations. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it was really, really interesting to watch and, to kind of work my way through. Yeah. So you can ask more questions about that. Yeah.
Like how, what was going through your mind? Did you feel like you won the lottery or what?
Yes, I'll tell you exactly what's going through my mind because I was driving in my little Carmen Ghia, which I bought because it looks like a Porky Pig car. You know what a Carmen Ghia looks like?
Yeah, like a gremlin, pretty much.
Yeah, little tiny ones.
I'm driving in my little car, and I'm driving over the hill to go to Warner Brothers in the morning, and I'm kind of tense and thinking, what should I do and everything. And I said, Jack, relax. You got the best job in the world right now. Kind of roll with it for a change. It was real because, as I was telling you earlier, about my barging ahead and getting to the end of projects and everything. I thought it was the first time I thought I could actually chill for a little while. Yeah. So yeah, when you get those pockets, and I'm going to tell you something else here. I'm going to jump ahead. I worked later at Marvel Productions, and there's a whole story behind that. But Marvel Productions was a company that didn't actually have the rights to all the Marvel cartoons because Stan Lee kept signing off things to all different studios and all that. So people would say, "Oh, it must be really exciting to work on Spider-Man." I said, "No, we don't have Spider-Man. We have Muppet Babies, or things like that."
We have Muppet.
Yeah. But there were weeks at Marvel where I didn't do much, and I was drawing a check, and I would try to generate projects, And I actually went into a meeting and one of my colleagues said, "Jack, stop lobbying for work."
Wow.
But here's the thing I'm getting at. I would come home, at the end of a week or whatever, and put down the check, and Kay would say, my wife would say, "Relax. You have earned this. This week where you didn't work a lot makes up for all the weeks where you work too damn hard for almost nothing. Just relax about it." So I think that, during the course of your career, you're going to have circumstances where you feel like, maybe I'm getting, maybe I have hit the lottery here. Maybe I am earning too much. Don't question it, okay? It'll balance out.
Yeah.
I think that in the arts that does happen. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, it takes a lot. Well, it may or may not take a lot to find work today with art.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
How hard was it to get on board with all those major label IPs like you did? Or was it easy because you had the ad agency going?
What does UP stand for? I'm not good with that.
It was a misspell. It was IP, intellectual property.
Oh, intellectual properties. Yeah. Okay. Right. So, well, it was basically a matter of working for the studios. Going back to the 80s, you have to remember that there were only 3 TV networks at the time, which is astounding, and it was kind of a lottery. And there were maybe a half a dozen major production animation studios at the time, and some funny little studios that did commercials and things like that. Mm-hmm. But that meant was that I do believe that there was a point at which I think I knew everybody who was working at the time. It was a small industry, and it's one of the things that I liked about it. It was not subject to the big Hollywood blockbuster mentality. As I said, it was hard enough just to keep the Warner Brothers animation department going with, with occasional specials and things. So, I worked that very well through the 80s. The big change was Roger Rabbit, the film.
Yeah.
Because the belief had been that it was no longer economically feasible to do really full, good-looking animation. And Steven Spielberg wanted to change that. Now, when Roger Rabbit came out, I was really nervous because it had gone over budget and, it had been started again and again. And Spielberg, he was not, for all his virtues and all, he was not really a great businessman. And I thought, if this movie tanks, it'll kill the animation industry. Fortunately, although it cost a fortune, it was brilliant, and nobody else could have brought together all those characters at once. And it proved that there was both a market for the characters and also that it was possible to duplicate the quality of the earlier theatrical shorts and such. So that jump-started the animation industry again.
Yeah, it was that's one of the best. That is my favorite movie actually. When it comes down to it,
Yeah, and then he went into Warner's and he said, "I want to do Tiny Toons," which was a new version of that. And then Batman came along with that. So that's like a whole new age of animation that was jump started by that kind of thing. Yeah. So
But, didn't they say something about how many cells was that? How many cells were in Roger Rabbit? 12,000? Or how many were there?
Lord only knows, but it was done in traditional animation combined with live action, which is incredibly laborious. That's like cathedral building, Yeah. And I'm still a huge fan of hand-drawn animation. I think you can tell it. I think you can feel it. I really do think that no matter how good a CGI movie is, there's something just doesn't have soul in it. Yeah.
It's not, it's not the same. Like, it looks like too streamlined or like.
Yeah. There's no, the expression is hand, and this is one reason why, a few years ago, I went back to doing my own artwork. I do portraiture and things like that. And it was my wife who said, "You're working on a computer all day long." And she says, "You've lost touch with your feeling of being an artist again." Now, since she's in the fashion industry and since she's a sewer, she works with her hands, she knows craft. And she got me started with that again and creating a persona for myself where I didn't think of myself just as a cartoonist. I was also, a fine artist. I could be, do some things that were serious. But the main thing was, to get back to doing something where I really felt like I had some tactility. That's the other word that I use, something.
Tactics.
Tactility. And it vanishes in our computerized age.
Yeah, it really does.
Mm. Oh, so you want to talk about the Roger Rabbit comics, just to tie that off, because I know you've been waiting for answers on that. So I was working my ideal setup was I'd be working for an animation studio under contract, and I'd also have a deal to do some comic books on the side. And that was a great psychological balance, because in animation, you're part of a big cog machine and everything like that. A lot of the times your scripts, don't resemble what you do originally. Yeah. Comic books has so many fewer collaborators that generally I could write a comic, go to the editor, draw it up, let it, and then 3 months later, and it actually reads and looks like what I wanted it to be, So I think that's my core art form. So I always kept that going, and they called me into Disney Consumer Products. Now, this is all interesting. In big companies, the division that handles comic books is called Consumer Products because they put everything under one umbrella that's like, mugs and toys and games. And Consumer Products is everything but the original cartoon.
Yeah, so it was all consumer. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but I just didn't know the term.
There you go. Yeah. So once you know that term, you know an entree to a completely different level of companies. So I had a great story editor, David Seidman, who called me and said, "Would you like to work on Roger Rabbit?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "What do you think?" He had a big cutout of life-size cutout of Jessica Rabbit in his office, which of course he still has in his living room many years later. And I said, "Can I write Jessica stories?" And he said, "Yes." And that was my specialty. I actually wrote Jessica Rabbit stories specifically.
Nice.
Now, one of the reasons I wrote this, I asked for this was, my aunt was a famous stripper. During the time, the late 40s, when Roger Rabbit is theoretically set, right?
Yeah.
So I interviewed my aunt and got ideas for Jessica Rabbit stories. See?
Like Chicago.
That's right. So, the lesson we learned from this is we take from life, to do cartoon stories and stuff. But that's
reference to life.
Yeah. So my aunt had a TV show here in Los Angeles in the early 50s. So I did a story where Jessica Rabbit, goes to, is offered a TV show,
Yeah.
And so we did parodies of all the early 50s type stuff. So, yeah. So I think, the point I'm also making there is that my relation to cartoons and comics has always been very personal. If you ask where your ideas come from, it comes from whatever I'm going through, and, if something happened to me, hey, it happens immediately to Daffy Duck. So,
right, for sure. Because it's like an extension of yourself. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. And those characters come from, a real place, I think. There's a reason they've lasted all these years.
For sure.
So, yeah. Speaking of that, that's a good segue into Alvin and the Chipmunks. So the studio I went to after Warner Brothers was Ruby Spears. And Ruby Spears was run by Ken Spears and Joe Ruby, and they had created Scooby-Doo.
Oh, okay.
the thing was they had created Scooby-Doo while they were at Hanna-Barbera, so they had no rights to it. So they started their own studio, and they kept coming up that were exactly like Scooby-Doo. So it was like four kids and a cat, or 4 kids and a goose, or 4 kids and a, you know. So but the originator, the son of the originator of Alvin and the Chipmunks back in the 50s, Ross Bagdasarian Jr. and his wife Janice Carmen came in to recreate the Chipmunks, and that was in the 1980s. Okay, so I and my writing partner were put to work on that, and I loved working on the Chipmunks. For some reason, I found it was just really great to work with. And then at a certain point, I was made co-editor of the show, and I was sitting around the office with my co-editress one day, and she said, "Jack, what do you think is the birth order of the Chipmunks?" And I said immediately, "Oh, I know. Simon's the oldest, Alvin's the middle one, and Theodore's the youngest." And she said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Oh my God, it's me and my brothers." I never realized it. And I went home that I went home that night, and I told my wife, and she says, "Duh." But I had been writing this dynamic for, a couple of years, and I had no idea where all this good stuff was coming from. It was all coming from, my family dynamic with my brothers. So that's a strange thing to realize that, you've been working on things and drawing on, resources that you didn't even know you had.
Mm-hmm.
So, geez. All right. So, where do you go from here? Yeah, we got more questions here, but yeah, if you want to, proceed from here. Gosh, where does that take us up to? I guess you are very, very much a traditional artist. Do you do anything digitally? Do you work digitally at all? Have you? Not really, no. The odd thing was that when I was young, I got into the arts to avoid science, and something very weird happened. Science and art got together, and I have the computer revolution. I have a theory about this. I think, remember, I'm a lot older than you guys, and I remember, when you go to school and there were the science people and the art people, and they never met, all of that, and there were beatniks and there were, nerds and all that. And I think what happened was rock and roll. In the mid 60s, the psychedelic weirdo rock and rollers discovered technology. When the Beatles and Brian Wilson went into the studio and started pressing buttons and everything like that, I believe that suddenly the borderline between, the freaks and the scientists started to break down. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. No, I totally know.
Yeah, isn't that an amazing theory? Because since then, where do, the freaks go? They take the technology and make it work for them.
Yeah.
That did not, so I have I have kind of a border in my brain between the left brain and the right brain. If I have to go to do a technical thing, I can feel my gears kind of grinding a bit. It's not natural for me to straddle that.
Yeah.
But what I'm finding with the people the younger people that I'm teaching, they don't have that borderline, whatever, and, you want to make a movie now? Hey, you go down to Target or whatever and you buy everything you need, you go out and make a movie, right? You don't need this. You distribute it. You put it on the internet. You run the business. You buy the business, program to do it. All of this stuff used to be, proprietary technology for individual professions. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just broken down in a way that, I think is excellent, but I do feel in some senses a little left behind with this, but that's why I like working with younger people. And that's, I love teaching. I'm just crazy about it. And I have been very lucky to have terrific students.
Yeah. That's why you do it. So you can be there to inform everybody of how to do it the right way, run around willy nilly and be like, no, this is how you do it,
Yeah. But it's temperamental too. I realize that I have a collaborative temperament, and rather than a competitive one. And I like other people having success. I have so many young people who have brought me, opportunities and such because I've helped them, and I have a good relation among my collaborators, and that's important to me. So, but it is a teaching personality, and And I don't feel that I'm better than my students in a lot of ways. I'm learning. They bring me a tremendous amount. One of the things, I think at one point here you asked me, what is my favorite program? Oh, that's the great thing is I ask my students, I say, what are you watching lately? Mm-hmm. So they bring it to me. I was teaching class once, I said, what do you like? And all these hands went up. It was all Adventure Time.
Oh, that's a good one.
Seen Adventure Time, and I saw Adventure Time, and I go, what? It's just amazing. And also, what I was surprised about, though, pleasantly surprised, was one of my students sent me the proposal Bible for Adventure Time, and it was exactly the way I taught a proposal for an animated series, which is what I do through Vancouver Animation School, where I teach online. You guys want to take writing for animation? There it is. There I am. And what you learn is you do a script for an existing animated show as a sample. You do a Bible, a development of your own original series, and you do a pilot for your own animated series. Within 3 months, you have a complete package to present to a studio. So.
No, I was going to take this class, but I never got the opportunity to.
Yeah, but Vincent, can I ask you how long ago was that?
That would have been probably about a year ago now.
Okay, because we had a class with 2 sessions per week for 3 months, and we realized that if I could compress it a bit down to 1 session per week, we could make it less expensive. And I wanted to make it less expensive so that more people could take it.
Wow.
So you might want to look at it again and see that we managed to cut the price down considerably. Mm. Okay? Yeah.
All right. Perfect. I'll definitely take a look and see. Especially since I'm working with Paige Hazley now on Spider in History. So.
Oh. All right. Great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, let's see.
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was asking about digitally because,
right.
Like the digital programs, because I was going to ask you, we were shown at the Art Institutes, clips of Chuck Jones using Adobe Flash.
I was never aware of that. I saw that.
Yeah, he did. Like, he made a Wile E. Coyote cartoon and, like, this other cartoon with, like, Flash, like, on the computer.
But you could tell the quality was a little bit different. You could tell it was a little more, it's kind of hard to say, but you can always tell when it's a hand-drawn compared to a digital drawn.
It was still super sweet.
Oh, it was
really good.
Is it footage of him actually doing this?
No, it was him, it was just the file.
Yeah.
His cartoon that he did, and we, like, all watched it. We're like, oh, Chuck Jones used Adobe Flash, blah, 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 blah. And
if you could send me a link to this or something, I'd love to see it, obviously.
I can try to find it, and I'll send you one. I'll email it to you.
Yeah, that'll be valuable for my students, so.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, yeah.
Look, I remember this. And this is like about 1980, when I and Hal Gear, in the animation department, somebody came in to demonstrate the idea of computer animation. And it was just, balls and squares moving about in space and everything like that. And it was all interesting and nice, but afterwards we thought, you can never do Daffy Duck that way, No. Now you can. Yeah, but that's how fast the universe is traveling, technologically. I think we're a bit ahead of ourselves. I'd like to pull back a bit and,
we kind of are, I think there's a lot of people, like, trying to grasp for stuff, and, like, I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of grasping going on.
A lot of grasping going on, yeah. That's good. Sure. The other thing that I would say, if you ask me what program I really like, I love the new Mickey Mouse theatrical shorts or that Disney has been doing, and they've been posting them online. Have you seen them? Because the Mickey, they're great. Just, Mickey Mouse shorts. And they've gotten the best new young directors to do these. And the Mickey is designed very much like the late 20s, early 30s thing. And they're, yeah.
What?
What's right? And they're terrific. I'm really, really pleased. And it's so smart of Disney to do that, because it's the way to, Mickey has always been kind of a problem for them, because in addition to being their character, he's the symbol of the company. So he can't do the kind of things that Donald Duck can do and all that. So they loosened him up again. And the way to loosen him up was to get back, to the origins of the character. I think it's great stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I did have a question, kind of, because of the fact of just kind of backpedaling a little bit.
Yeah.
You said that you worked with some comic books, and you kind of went through like Warner Brothers and a subsidiary of Marvel. Now, did you ever get to work or talk with anyone like Neil Gaiman?
No, for the most part, most of my work has been in the funny animal area. I can do, action adventure and that sort of thing. But here's the problem I ran into. At one point, yes, I was going to work on a Spider-Man series. Okay. Oh, great. We got the rights to Spider-Man and everything. Oh, big excitement in the corporate world. So they bring in a story editor and all that, and they send me the Spider-Man Bible, which is this huge thumping thing. And I thought, oh, great. I got it. And so I open up this Bible, which is already like 100 pages. And at the beginning it says, before you read this Bible, read every Spider-Man comic book from 1967 through to and I just closed it up and said, hey, I'm going back to Bugs Bunny. Okay, so
all right. Well,
the big problem with adventure and everything is the lore. Oh my God. And what we've had to do now, since all these things are popular, is every few years you have to, erase everything and start all over again, So, I don't tend to think that, how can we say that densely? If that's it. Did I answer your question? I can't remember what the question was.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the reason I ask is because Neil Gaiman, he just came out with a new book called Norse mythology.
Yeah.
And Cody has a thing from, I believe it's Audible that you need to read now, Cody.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Do an ad read really quick.
Okay.
For you listeners of I've Read Out of Things to Say podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. I personally recommend Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. Try that audiobook free or another audiobook free by trying audible.com. That's www.audibletrial.com/iRoots. Thanks, Audible.
Thank you, Audible.
Nicely done, yeah.
So, yeah, that was one of the biggest things that, obviously because of the fact that we worked with so many companies doing storylines and writing these pitch Bibles and going through them, I just wanted to see back then, is it, I don't know how close you are now with it, like how close you are with the comic book scene now.
Yeah.
But how much has it actually changed for up and coming writers compared to, seasoned writers?
Specifically about comic books, I haven't written comic books for about 10 years. I miss it. I really do. But I just got out of it and I couldn't find my way quite back in. For one thing, because there just aren't that many funny animal type, books anymore. And I got it, as I say, I got into teaching. I love doing that. I've done a lot of animation, in my consulting business. I do Bibles and developments for independent studios, and the money's better. The money is not great in comics, but see, the other thing is, what I found out, I thought of getting my own original comic going, and I had a couple of ideas. We can get into those, but what I found out was at a certain point that they're almost like a collaboration between the publisher and you. You're doing a lot of work,
Yeah.
And again, there's different things at different stages of your life, And I looked at my wife, and my wife and I talked one day and said, you know what, if we were like 30 years old and younger, I wouldn't mind, having the garage piled with a bunch of comics, and we're wrapping them up and sending them out or whatever, however this way, but it's like we're too old for this kind of thing, you know what I mean? If you were to do an indie kind of thing. So all the comics that I did do were licensee kind of things for major studios like Warner Brothers and Disney and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I consider it a missed opportunity in my life. I would have loved to have my own, my own book, and it's parallel. I'm gonna tell you an idea that I had that, I've worked on, which is really interesting. Me and a wonderful fellow named Byron Vaughns, who is the producer director of Tiny Toons. He and I got an idea. I was driving past the Warner Brothers studio, and there was a big mural of the there was a big mural of the Warner Brothers Looney Tunes characters and the DC characters. And it suddenly dawned on me to bring them together. Mm-hmm. So we did a proposal for the Looney DC movie, where, the Looney Tunes would, through a tear in time and space, the Looney Tunes characters would meet the DC characters. Great idea, right? So we went in and we've had a history of pitching this with Warner Brothers, and we went in and they said, Warner's is an odd studio. Warner's, unlike Disney, is kind of has little competitive units, and that's a source for, back when Clampett and Freeling and Jones were working, they were kind of each nudging each other to do, say, I saw Frizz's Bugs cartoon, I can do a better one, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that structure kind of exists at Warner Brothers today. And we found ourselves kind of shunted back and forth. And Warner's had just acquired DC, and DC's offices were moving out here to the Hollywood coast, okay? So they said, well, I don't know. We have to get DC to cooperate, with their characters and our characters and all that. And they actually suggested that it might be better as a comic book. So Byron and I had to wait a while for the DC offices to locate out here to do something like this. And it turns out that Byron got a call and they said they would be interested in doing a Looney DC meetup as a graphic novel or a comic, graphic novel, which would be great. Mm-hmm. So Byron and I were talking about this and how to get this going. That would get me back into, into comic writing for the first time in years. I would love to do it, And I've never done a graphic novel, full-size novel type thing. So that would be great. So. You heard it here first.
Nice. Damn. You hear that, guys?
Scoop for the night.
Secrets of the industry.
Right.
So, Cody, you got a couple more questions, correct?
Not really off the emails, but maybe...
I can tell you about another project I'd talk about if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. This is going to tie things off here, okay? So... I really would like to sell an original project, and I also kind of wanted to get out of this, this pigeonholing that I've had as somebody who does funny animal type stuff, but I didn't quite know how to do it. I have a friend, John Lustig, and I really want to recommend. He does a thing called Last Kiss Comics. Go to lastkisscomics.com, and he bought the rights to old romance comics from the 50s and 60s, and he does new captions for them. And they're hysterical. Really funny. Okay? Yeah, you're going to love this. Subscribe. You get one every day. Trust me on this. Okay. So John and I were in contact and all that, And one day I had left the Warner Brothers animation department, which is on their ranch lot. Okay. The ranch lot is where they have the Western sets and things like that. And it was dusk, and I happened onto the old 50s street where they would film things like Leave It to Beaver. You guys know about Leave It to Beaver?
Oh, yeah.
Good. And I looked, and as the sun was going down, I peeked in, and there's no backs to the houses. It's all fake.
Oh my God.
Not only that, guys, I realized that this is where they filmed all the old Twilight Zone episodes, which were particularly creepy because they often had the same actors and the same lighting and everything, but something weird was going on Elm Street. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I went home and I suddenly had an epiphany, because this is when I grew up. And as I say, my father was this, swinging ad man, and I came up with a project, and I worked on it with John, because we wanted to look like Last Kiss Comics. I called it It's Always Bucky. And Bucky is this optimistic Leave It to Beaver kid, but we're going to see all the weird stuff that was going on behind the scenes with his parents and all these people in the neighborhood. So it's like dark Leave It to Beaver. Yeah. So this kind of breaks my persona as somebody who only does, funny animal stuff and all. And it allows me to approach new markets, Adult Swim, Netflix, Amazon. These are amazing new markets for cartoons. Mm-hmm. Personally, I think if Warner Brothers did it, it's exactly what Warner Brothers cartoons should do now. But, I hope to, what I really like to see is that, you guys can subscribe and get the whole first season of, It's Always Bucky from Netflix or whatever, okay?
Nice. You could also, depending on, are you going to go for more of a dark style with it?
Yeah.
Because Channel Federator is another one that's for up and comings and stuff, and it's really good.
Well, I know Fred Seibert very well, and I've talked to him about that. Federator is doing, I think, just shorts right now. I don't know. Fred is a great guy, and he's very, very smart. I mean, he's created a system whereby people come to him, he produces a pilot or whatever. If another, if a major company picks up on that pilot, he's involved. Smart, nice, and, really an achieving man. I first met him when he was in charge of Hanna-Barbera. He was brought in there, I think, in the late 80s, and he admitted he knew nothing much about cartoons. But he came from MTV, where he created the ever-changing MTV logo.
Oh.
How's that for an achievement, huh?
Okay.
Yeah. So, if we're going to sum up here, this is good for my students, and even at my age, this is good for me. It's a real Wild West out there in terms of getting cartoon projects going. In some ways it's very hard to navigate, but also anything can happen. And there's nothing that's too strange or too unusual or too far out that you maybe could get it done. And TV cartoons in particular, you can be an auteur. You can be in charge of the thing. You can do the voices. It looks exactly right. And I still can't believe that Seth MacFarlane hosted the Academy Awards. A cartoonist.
Yeah.
Figure. That's weird.
That's my guy, though.
There you go, so, yeah. Anyway, so, anything else? I mean, this feels kind of like a wind-up to me.
Well, yeah, I want to keep you all night, but
yeah, we're very happy to have you here. Now, obviously, because of the fact that you are from a different generation than us, we usually ask our guest, what's the biggest, nerdiest moment that you ever had? Like meeting someone that kind of gave you that nerd moment. So usually we ask that, and let's hear that from you.
Okay, I had a couple of those. Oh, let's see. I met Woody Allen once.
Nice.
Yeah, but here's how I met Woody Allen. Okay, this was mid 70s or something like that, and I was thinking that maybe just instead of being a cartoonist, I could be a comedy writer too. Okay, so I was in a bookstore here in the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. Okay, and I bought a book called How the Great Comedy Writers Create Laughter. Okay, and there's interviews with Mel Brooks, and all these people. I turn around and there's Woody Allen standing in the aisle. And he's with this gorgeous woman, who's talking at him and everything. And I thought, Jesus, this is Woody Allen, right? Okay, so I said, this is kind of a coincidence, Mr. Allen. I bought this book, and would you sign? You don't even have to sign your own name. You can sign Grover Cleveland or whatever, So, and he took it. He was very nice. He signed it. Now, here's the interesting thing. He said he has a really powerful signature. I learned handwriting analysis from my father. He knows exactly what he's doing. And what I saw in person was he's actually very muscular. He was wearing a shirt and all that, and compact, and it's this weird nerd head on top of a really compact body, and you sense this strength in him, while this woman was talking at him. It's very weird. He really is the nerd king.
He's the nerd king.
Yeah. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and the other, I know Stan Lee well enough to say hello to him and chat a little bit. And that was a wonderful thing. This was, 2 or 3 years ago. And one of the great things, I belong to the Writers Guild now, and so I get invited to movie screenings and all that. Movie screenings are great. You get to go to, movie lots and stuff like that. So I go down to the old MGM lot for a movie screening, and it's about, 7 at night. It's all twilight and everything. And they have a little shuttle bus that takes you to the screening from the parking lot. Because, hey, it's the MGM studio, right? Nothing less. So I come there, the shuttle bus opens. There's nobody on the shuttle bus except Stan Lee. They come in and say, hey, Stan, how you doing? Jack, how are you? He talks like this and he gestures. I hope, I hope your podcast audience can see these gestures, like a Jack Kirby drawing, right? Yeah. Who I knew, by the way. I'll tell you about Jack Kirby. That's how blind I am. All right. So Stan, I figure, Stan's probably had a longer and harder day than I have at 7 o'clock, right? So we sit back and relax a little bit, sit there and then he says, Jack, I can't believe that every stupid idea I ever had is now $1 billion movie. And then so how's that for a triumph in life? Yeah.
Very, very much.
I mean, that's crazy. And did you know Jack Kirby too? You knew him? That's crazy.
and I'm going to wind up with this. Okay, here's how I want to wind up. When I was at Marvel Productions, Jack Kirby had been hired to do presentation drawings, for new ideas for animated series and such, because he was fighting with Stan Lee and wasn't working for Marvel anymore, Marvel Comics.
Mm-hmm.
So Jack lived out here, in Los Angeles, and my writing partner and I, Gordon Kemp was my writing partner. We had an office, and Jack would come in, and while waiting to see Joe Ruby, Jack would come into our office and hang out. Jack was like this little guy out of a 1930s Warner Brothers movie, like the guy who would run the newsstand,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Hi, how you doing? Okay? Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And Jack would come in with this portfolio that was too small for his drawings. So outside, you'd see these boards with, boulders and fists and things coming out there. He'd sit down and he'd wait for hours, to see Joe Ruby. And Jack just had ideas coming off the top of his head. He said, did you know that Hitler was working on something that to poison the water supply? Yeah, Jack, fine. All that. But what I have to tell you is this, that if people who, no matter how talented people are, geniuses and things like that, I'll tell you this, after knowing Jack Kirby, you really don't have to be an asshole to be a genius. You can be a nice, decent, hardworking guy.
That's a good way to wrap it up.
Right.
Well, guys, it looks like our friend Jack here has ran out of things to say. Cody's run out of things to say.
Yeah.
And I've run out of things to say. So we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Going from there. So thanks a lot, guys, and we will end the podcast here.